I don't know if I can take it anymore.
When you are depressed, you don't want to get
It
out of
seems
it.
so hard
You
today.
don't want to be bothered with anyone.
I don't have any
But
motivation.
overcoming depression is going to require that you get up and engage with life again.
All I want to do is sleep.
When you are feeling down, the worst thing you can do
The last thing
is
I want to do is
isolate
hang out
yourself,
with my friends.
because isolation actually intensifies sadness.
I don't think this will ever
So
go
I
away.
recommend finding a distraction that will shift your energy.
I wish somebody would just save me from this mental hell. Hi, this is Barbie Moreno with the Mental Hell Podcast. And today I have Logan Lenz, who is the CEO of Nucleus and likes to refer to himself as the captain of the ship. Hi, Logan.
Hello, Barbie. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm extremely interested in hearing what you have to say, because you are, talking about psychedelics, but it seems like in a very different way than like a woo-woo, come to my garden, take some mushrooms and life is great kind of guy.
Absolutely. I'm glad you got that correct, because I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a researcher. I'm a tech entrepreneur, and I'm trying to lay the foundation of the ancillary services that I think will impact the most amount of lives. And for me, the mental health crisis is the biggest long emergency that we're not necessarily dealing with correctly. And I think psychedelics is a solution for that.
So let's first by saying, like, why this, why you? Everybody has a story why they get into things.
Yeah, I've had great success in the past, enough so to sort of now think about my legacy or the impact I will leave now that I have kids and a family, and sort of this appetite for impact and sort of making sure that I'm doing something meaningful and have a purpose. Uh, I leaned on this specific, what I just said, the mental health crisis, as something that I think is not just really, really severe, but also something that I think can be tackled and addressed through the means of technology. So my background is I'm an engineer, so a programmer, and I've built technologies in the past, started off in the marketing agency world, but then sort of started to trickle toward mental health through health technology, HR platforms, and sort of adjacently got to this because of my interest in the space. But I'm also not a user. We're more slated directionally for the adoption at the regulatory level, so that this could be fuel psychedelics I'm speaking about can be facilitated medicinally and clinically under the supervision of a licensed therapist. So we in no way endorse street or recreational use. And like I said, we're laying the foundation. So for me, having a marketing background and a tech background, we're building the services that could propel those folks that are much smarter than me, that are bringing these medicines to the masses, but also help destigmatize what I think is a negative sentiment of these drugs.
Now, I know you've mentioned that you have kids and you're married and all that stuff. Is there something deeper in that, like a anybody in the family that suffers from mental health? Like, there has to be something deeper for this to be a subject that you're interested in.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've had in my immediate family addiction problems circulating me, and I was always an introvert as a kid. So as I was observing that, I sort of learned to, I don't know, kind of go inward and manage my thoughts. And I became very self-aware pretty quickly. And I also learned how to, I don't know, be emotionally mature at an age that allowed me to, I think, be more successful at an earlier age, because I had to do everything on my own. So it's not an amazing childhood, but it's also something I'm very thankful for, because I've seen people suffer, and it's
Yeah.
specifically my parents and my brother. I mean, quite literally, everyone except for me had demons that they've dealt with, and somehow I was immune to that, or I dodged it in a way that allowed me to understand what the actual, I guess, my super strength is, which is this self awareness and this understanding that you have to work on yourself and there's nothing external that's going to do that for you. Whereas addiction goes toward those vices and needs it as an input to the brain. So I read a lot, I work out a lot, I think a lot, and I think when you have a good understanding of yourself, those things sort of replace the things that I've seen my family succumb to, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So I would imagine that when you're doing psychedelics, it brings out more of who you are. You have to work through the emotions and all of that versus medicating with something that's like an antidepressant or anxiety. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I'm not even speaking on my personal experience with psychedelics. I'm just speaking with or without psychedelics. Kind of the work that I believe everyone needs to do on themselves is never ending and it's challenging,
Yeah.
but you have to accept it as an obstacle. And I'm sure you know this from running this show, and you've probably met so many people with such, I imagine, very detailed and um, checkered pasts and
Mhm.
histories. But I don't call myself a psychedelics user. I'm more of a champion of it, knowing that the benefits and how efficacious and the evidence-backed data is telling us. And that's what we do at Nucleus, is sort of point to that research and say, well, the current solutions aren't really going the way that we were promised. So we need to engineer our way to a new system.
So with the current mental health crisis, what unique approach is Nucleus taking to address this issue, and how does technology play a role in the solution?
Yeah, I think for us, technology is the solution. So what we're trying to do, just to be clear again, is push forward the new systems that would replace the old, for lack of a better way to say it. And what I mean by that is creating piping and data awareness and the destigmatization of the topics that people are afraid to talk about, kind of shed the boundaries or at least push the limits of understanding and thinking about how things should actually work. So, without getting too far ahead, I know we talked a little bit about blockchain, but we have some projects like that that sort of shift the narrative based solely in technology being able to be a central point of truth, so that we can understand what is the most cost effective way to deliver the right treatments and have it be backed by data that is indisputable and user owned. And what the importance of the user owned side is that now you understand the body, the mind, and the connection, because you have access to your data and you have full control over it. Our healthcare system is the opposite. I have to go to my doctor. I don't even know what my blood work is telling me by default. I got to submit paperwork to actually get that. And we need that reversed in a way that, yes, I'm speaking under the lens of psychedelics being a treatment, but it's more of a Trojan horse for the whole system,
Right.
because we don't even put an emphasis on mental health. So part of our solution that we're building as a venture studio is to diversify technological solutions to this transparent awareness that everything should be user owned. And yes, psychedelics just so happens to be a better way to deliver real outcomes once this passes through clinical trials, which is a whole other topic because we're still early here and
Right.
we're not naive to that. So part of our venture studio is to deliver real information and data and solutions that could save people time now. So we have a data platform where people can obtain this knowledge. We have a blog and some reports that help people that are working within the industry make better decisions. And then we help something called ketamine clinics, which I'm sure your audience
Yeah.
knows about, which is technically a psychedelic. We help those clinics grow through a marketing platform that we built. So we're fully integrated kind of across this short-term and long-term spectrum of adding value to the psychedelics industry, with the full mission of pushing and propelling these medicines further.
So it sounds like you're giving people the ability to take their power back in their healthcare decisions.
I think in the gist of it is transparency and user owned is our vision, and we think that's where the world needs to go. And decentralization, and we don't get into crypto, but the whole idea of blockchain and Web3 is something that we fully support and want to integrate with.
And is this something that would be available to all lifestyles and classes? Like, do you guys want to push this into it is how healthcare is done. I would say that lower income households generally don't see doctors as much, and oftentimes don't even understand half of the things that they're being told when they do see a doctor. So do you think this will integrate those households as well?
I think we have to have a complete shift. The paradigm just has to sort of be so extreme for me to even be able to answer that, because we all have great intentions, but we're so far away from even adoption at a very narrow level because of regulatory frameworks and clinical trials and how long that actually takes. So it's hard for me to even imagine how we can get the price down low enough and or create a system that both satisfies and answers that question in a positive way, because I think we all want to see that, but we can't even envision what that would look like without taking an incremental approach to breaking down what's currently there. But I think we all can agree, and we're all sort of friends in this industry. We have blogs that are educating people, we have courses that are being presented to facilitators to help train them. They know that they're not going to price gouge or try to figure out ways to be greedy as they're delivering the service to their patients, and instead want to give back. And the best way to do that is to figure out how to make this ubiquitous, but also ensure that demand meets supply in a way that we can deliver this to the masses to help as many people as possible, and not just make a business out of it
Right.
and create another version of the same system filled with greed just because we
Mhm.
were the first ones there. That doesn't
Right.
seem fair.
Yeah, and then watered down the entire idea altogether, right? Because of that. Yeah.
Yep.
So what pushback are you getting right now? Is this an insurance pushback? Do you find that you're fighting with regulators and people just because, people are making money and they don't want you to take away their money?
I think you got to kind of look at, so we're well diversified, meaning we have a lot of different user experiences. So we do have practitioners that are able to field immediate patients that are needing treatment. That's like our right now, short term, our core responsibility is to make sure those people find the right treatments. And in that way, insurance isn't an issue, or it's not even like in the equation, because the ketamine clinics that we support and the facilitators, they have their own ways to try to reduce the price, I guess. But they also have a business to run. So it's kind of this interesting limbo in between where we're trying to play matchmaker and then kind of be done with it. But then you have the ultra rich and the wealthy that can sort of have the luxury of finding retreats
Mm-hmm.
in South America or the Netherlands. And of course, we can't forget about those experiences, but it's somewhat unfortunate that that's just going to be that demographic. And there's not real pushback other than some of the questions that you're bringing about being a curiosity and a desire, which is we want to make things better. The means of which to do it, they're still foreign or too vague to actually grasp and make tangible. But yeah, it's more of like a timing thing. The pushback we get from the average user would be, how do I know this works? Or just more general questions about obtaining knowledge that will help them make a decision on how they will interface with the medicines.
So today, at this point in your guys's operation or what you're working on, where is it? Like, you have people who are patients who are being connected with doctors, you're in trials. Where are you? To the person who's listening to this, what value do you add to them right now?
Yeah, so we've built at Nucleus, it's an ecosystem, and we're a venture studio. And if you're not familiar with that term, it means we diversify the creation of assets by building multiple startups underneath the Nucleus umbrella. And right now, because of the macroeconomic concerns, which is there's not a lot of capital around the psychedelics industry, we're focused on three assets, and none of which do anything with drug development, drug discovery, delivery even. We're partners that support, so through our SciRise platform, which is our marketing platform, ketamine clinics, because they're operating today and they're actually helping people with ketamine treatments. We're positioned to just be a partner of theirs by empowering them to drive more patients and awareness so that they could grow their clinic, but also treat more people. And then we're just educating. So we're not doing anything regulatory other than promoting awareness and empowering those that are operating as stakeholders in this industry. And I want to make that clear is that although we champion the industry, we in no way have any sort of affiliation to the medicines themselves. But it is important to note that we're incubated by a fund called Eater Investments. So there is a VC firm that invests in us, that owns us, and they invest in. They're not a company operating in psychedelics, but they invest in. So they deploy capital in those types of companies, and there's a bunch of them. And you can go on our websites to find them, where there's just tons of organizations doing all sorts of things with, you name it, DMT, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA. And also new novel molecules. And that's a fascinating area. If you're into the research and science, we have a platform called Newly, where we kind of index the clinical trials, understand where they are. And that's really our position, is just to try to educate through the means that the tech allows us to do so.
Interesting. So I know, like, from my research, that they used LSD in trials in the 60s and 70s, and all of that stuff kind of got pushed to the side. Again, I know you're the kind of the tech part of it, but what do you think is going to make that thought process change?
Data. I mean, that's kind of why I keep saying that word, is we have a platform that's at the core of our ecosystem that powers the other platforms and tools that we end up building. So we have an API that looks at the data and says, oh, this is important, or this is evidence-backed, research-backed, undeniable, or this is a doctor just went through this process and verified this. And our technology sort of grades and weights that in a way that then we can utilize it. And I think that's our job and duty, is to shine a spotlight on those stories, because it's not out there. People hear the horror stories,
Right.
And we want to skew more to, well, how can we create awareness so that people understand their relationship to a potential benefit that they might have been afraid of. And the stigma doesn't help. So what you just said is, yes, that's the case of Timothy Leary back in the 60s, and then the war on drugs. That sort of put a stop on all of the development that could have happened from 1970 to now. But luckily, ever since, let's say, there's not been a lull in MDMA, believe it or not, because of Rick Doblin, and he's working on next year, hopefully getting approved for MDMA for PTSD for veterans, and that's going to be a monumental step. So I think it's going to be incremental, and you'll see things pass through and get approved in clinical trials. You see Oregon psilocybin, Measure 109, you're able to now do magic mushrooms in the state of Oregon. So you'll see that at the state level, you'll see that across different substances, and we're just here to shine a spotlight on those.
So when you do like a podcast like this, is the idea to educate, or is there an investment that, is there a platform for people to invest?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to meet smart people like you, Barbie. That's why I do it. But secondly, yeah, we're always growing our audience. So we're an ecosystem. This is also new. It's also early. And if we can help a life, many lives, become an engine or a source for education, then that's really what it's all about. But since you asked, we also are doing a crowdfunding campaign, which for those that are unfamiliar with something like WeFunder, that's where we're doing ours. It's an equity crowdfunding campaign, which if you invest as little as $200, you get ownership in Nucleus. And that's a really interesting thing that we decided to launch late last year. It will be closing soon. That's going to allow us to do what we're saying we want to do, which is give everybody access to these things, give everybody upside, and then share in this journey, because we're all just learning as we go. This is also new. And to have the participation of our audience, it's just an amazing way to level the playing field and get everybody involved. I lost your audio. Is that on my end?
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
I noticed that you guys on your website, there's 2 other CEOs or partners that you have. How did you guys come together?
Yeah, so I had mentioned Eater Investments. That's the VC firm. That's actually the managing partners of Eater Investments. So we were incubated through their fund as sort of a, well, the industry needs this sort of conversation that came from the fund itself. So that's Dustin Robinson, he's a managing partner, and Robert Velarde. And we're essentially now the stakeholders or the officers that kind of run the Nucleus ship, as you referred to, me being the captain. But we came together knowing that there was a problem to be solved here, and that as their fund invests in the development of the drugs, there's going to be a need to be a foundation that supports the destigmatization and to make better decisions for those that are operating as stakeholders. And it just made a lot of sense. So really early on, we had an opportunity to grow the data platform and our website, Psychedelic Invest, which also simultaneously sort of helps investors deploy capital in this space. So it's sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy where we know we were going to be supporting the mission of the fund, but also helping people in a way that the fund couldn't before, because when you're doing drug discovery, you don't actually get to, I don't know, see an immediate result or impact lives in the ways that Nucleus can with our marketing platform and our partnerships with the facilitators.
I feel like because the United States in particular is a consumer society, right? We are basically trained from the day we're born until the day we die to be a consumer. And that then creates the capitalistic idea and the money. And so if I, like, as somebody who has dealt with mental health issues, my concern would be that it would go very similar to the same way that prescriptions went, right? To marketing and doing things that maybe they're a little bit different in that space, but in general, it's just to make money. Can you address that for me?
I wish I could. I feel like I'm sitting here with my fingers crossed every day, hoping that people that come into this space are doing the right things. But is it true that people are already trying to, just sprint as fast as they can and not really look at their intentions along the way and just hope for a return because that's how they are? I'm seeing it more than ever. Like, we index all the investors, for example, all the organizations, and you can sort of start to isolate the bad actors and then see who's been doing this for a long time with the right intentions. And I feel like any market, especially like an open marketplace that's this nascent, is going to see that dynamic play out. It's just my hope and optimism that we're able to sort of suppress those sorts of behaviors. But I don't know. It just seems like it's an inevitability that those things are going to be there. We got to figure out a way to treat and manage them, but I'm not smart enough to know the answer either. So I say these things because I'm observing them, but I don't know what the solution is going to be.
Right. Yeah, it's hard because you need money and they have the money, right? But They have the money because they want a return on their money. And then at what point does it dilute the product?
This is not a like none of these are charities, and that's part of the problem right now. We're going through a cycle where a lot of money was deployed into psychedelics last year. So we had a boom because of the pandemic. And as that capital dries up, all the investors and the funds are going, well, I didn't get a return on that first phase here. So how many times am I going to have to keep allocating capital to then get something out? And yeah, these people aren't thinking they're donating to charity. So that's where you get that sort of, impression or bad taste where there might be a wall that we're hitting from the capital perspective. And once we hit that wall, where do we go? And that's a real fear for those that are operating in this space.
Are there a lot operating in this space? You mentioned others operating.
What's interesting about psychedelics, and I learn something new every day, is that you have all the different substances, then you have all the different geographies, which have different regulatory frameworks, but then you also have different intentions and purposes. So you have a lot of like retreats and even like the yoga space coming into doing things around the sort of, mindset of what psychedelics embodies. But then you have like research-based companies. There's just such a large supply chain and opportunity set for anybody that's curious to do something in this space. And it's just really interesting to like keep our eyes on those, because there are hundreds, now thousands, because if you include retreats and coaches and therapists that are sort of integrating breath work and things that are, adjacent to psychedelics, then it's just like taken on a life of its own. And that's what I mean by a lot of capital was deployed last year. You saw a whole bunch of experiments across a lot of different business plans that weren't only drug development, but you got like, directories that kind of do similar things to what we're doing, or functional mushroom brands. That's technically psychedelics, I guess, but like, mushroom coffee became a thing. So like those, because of the big pie and you start to slice it, it's just massive. And that's
Mhm.
why a data platform like ours is helpful, because it's hard to keep tabs on what's working, what's not, and also like where the opportunities are. But it's pretty robust. And that's why it's going to be hard to kill it as well. So if we run out of capital, we're going to have to figure out ways to help people in the short term so that we can generate real businesses. And what I mean by that is not capital intensive operations, but instead lean, bootstrap, actually profitable because they add value to the end user businesses. And that's what we're hoping to build at Nucleus.
So the end user is the businesses, not, is it the businesses or the individual? Are you guys helping to create a platform for businesses to get the information to individuals?
That's essentially what I mean today. Because we're a venture studio, we have the luxury of then playing with that and
Mhm.
going direct to consumer at some point in the future. But because it's so early, and because those that are operating are corporations that are doing something specific, whether that's a ketamine clinic or a research, Johns Hopkins or any other foundation that's needing data, that's really our model. So yeah, it's more B2B at this point.
How's the data collected?
So we developed something proprietary that we call Atoms, which is essentially just a monitoring system. Think of like beacons that we put around the internet, no different than like a Google crawler would do. And we then have our automated system kind of be notified and submit that signal essentially that something's changed. And that could be organizations doing something different, or a new clinical trial that was submitted, a new patent application. And we just have our eyes on those specific sources, where then we get to human curate that, categorize it, make sure it's not garbage, because we'll throw that stuff out, and then it sort of gets populated in the right place as we go. But it takes a team to do that. So we have data analysts that need to go through this, understand where it's coming from, maybe actually go do their homework to manually override what the system is doing. But we're always improving the level of automation, and it's something that we continue to learn from every day.
Does Big Pharma have this?
Do they have access to
To
our
something,
technology?
well, something similar to your technology, do you think?
Good question. I never thought about that. I mean, big pharma, it seems like they're peeking in, and I guess that's a version of yes, right? Like they have enough money to certainly build something on their own. So I imagine they're doing something similar. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because it seems like, I mean, data is the most valuable thing we have nowadays, right? I mean,
Mhm.
everything is collecting data on people, and the more data you have, the more, one, you can market to them, two, you can improve the needs for the public. So I would imagine, I guess the question would be, if Big Pharma has the same way of collecting information, I just wonder if they're going to try to push something like you guys out of the business, and because they're going to lose a bunch of money, right? So if they're collecting the same data that would help them, unless they're wanting to use those products that that would help, the psychedelics and things like that. Are you guys, do you feel like you're in a competitor space with them, or?
I honestly have not even thought about that, because they are peeking in,
Mhm.
and I think it's an acquisition opportunity for them once
Right.
the opportunity arises. For them to constantly not just develop something like that, but then maintain it. This industry moves so quickly
Yeah.
um, that it just, to me, doesn't make much sense. They're obviously, they have their reasons to shut down progress of
Right.
psychedelics. I get that, but once it kind of like the train leaves the station, there's no point of no return. I think we'll see a lot of strategy and
Yeah.
thinking around mergers and acquisitions. But that's something that I'm not A, smart enough to talk about. B, I know I've heard people like kind of wax poetic about if it's good or bad. I think the good side is you get a lot of capital from that. The
Hmm.
bad is what I said earlier. You get the replica of this current system and
That
the
you
same
have.
people
Yeah.
coming over the top and sort of applying their not so great infrastructure to something that was going to be more promising to begin with. So I don't know what is going to be the repellent,
Yeah.
but I imagine they're trying to figure that out at the same time on what their defenses are, what their strategy is. But if this is imminent and inevitable, certainly we're in a good position, not one that's competitive or should be looked at as negative because we'd be overthrown. I think we'd be a massive asset to a
Yeah,
company
you
like
would
that.
be embraced, I would imagine, again, because you have the data, right? And so, I mean, if people are going to turn to things like psychedelics, and like you said, the train has already left the station, they will have to adjust to that. They can't fight it, right? Because that's probably the way it's going to go, especially if you look at the generations that are coming forward. They are not interested necessarily in as much of the medications like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s were even interested in. They want more natural things. They are aware that there are more natural things out there. So I would imagine that you guys would be a benefit to big pharma more than a competitor, because you do have the data and you could help actually turn them towards a place where maybe they do more good than harm, as
Hmm.
long as, like you said, it doesn't turn back into the same, let's just call it a shit show that it is now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't even like to think about that because I remain a eternal optimist for better or worse, and I honestly don't want to even go down that road of thinking what it could become because the hope and the promise is right in front of me when I look at the data itself.
Yeah. So it sounds like Nucleus is leveraging technology to improve and streamline the delivery of not just mental health, but just health care in general. Does that sound about right?
I feel like our it's in layers and our vision then is more like chronologically sequenced. So like yeah, short term it's like push psychedelics, but then our mission is mental health because that's the outcome that we desire because
Right.
psychedelics is a means to that end and it's never an end. I don't mean end in that way. But then overall it's health care. So like if psychedelics and mental health can create this parity between mental health and the actual healthcare system that puts an emphasis on body, because you don't go to your doctor, maybe they ask you questions related to your thoughts, but there's more of a connection that's needed, and that's the end vision. Is if we could break down what we think is going to happen in the short term, let's say 6 to 10 years, then in 20, 30 years I think the whole system can be overhauled, and that's sort of our purpose.
Absolutely. I feel like it seems like in the last few years, almost probably since COVID, to be quite truthful, that mental health has become something that is becoming a bigger issue. You see a lot more influencers talking about their poor
Mm-hmm.
mental health. You see, Robin Williams killed himself. I mean, what an amazing actor and comedian and,
Loved
people
him.
say person. And it's just, I'm glad that it's finally coming to a space where people like, or companies like Nucleus and people in general are coming to a place where they feel like this is something that is a big deal and we really need to talk about it and bring
Mm-hmm.
awareness to it. And stop pushing it under the carpet and telling people to suck it up, buttercup, and cover up their feelings. And then they go into addictions like you were kind of talking about, right? That's where those addictions come from, not being able to deal with things and the way the society and the past and all of these different things. So it's an amazing opportunity, I would imagine, for anybody to invest in your company and your ideas, because data is key. I mean, it really is. It's going to tell us everything that we need to know.
I think so. And if we're making decisions without data, then God help us, right?
Right. It's kind of just like throwing a dart in the
Hmm.
dark, right? Hoping you're going to get something on the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we like to think that we're constantly improving and the industry is going to constantly mature. And we're sort of on that Venn diagram of both those things happening. Although it's early now, generationally, you just alluded to this, people want more, they demand more. And I think we're not going to really have a choice but to societally shift into the direction that we are pointed toward. Yes.
If you were to leave people with a thought today about either your goals or the company or just in general mental health, what would that be? No pressure.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's, oh man, what a great question. Because I don't know whether to answer it
How about
generally or
both?
specific to.
Maybe give us both. Maybe give us your
Uh,
your tech guy answer and your wish for the world, and then maybe something, a little bit more personal.
Well, I mean, I lean on curiosity more than anything in life. And that sort of guided me through this mindset that I think helps with the self and this overarching, I guess, topic of mental health, which is if you're open minded, you're allowing and this is very psychedelic of me, the neuroplasticity to actually occur and transform your thoughts. Whereas like closed mindedness then feels that they're always right. And then feeling you're always right is leading to confrontation and combativeness. And then it's kind of skewing this, well, what if I was wrong? And then you doubt yourself and then you lose confidence. Open mindedness and open to like love, as kumbaya as that sounds, is the only way that I've ever known to be. And thus, as silly as it sounds, I feel like I'm always living my best life, always feeling light and sort of, I don't know, floating in this, like, it's so hard to put into
Like a
words, and I try to do
euphoric
this.
kind of field.
Yeah, like when you feel like you're living your purpose because you understand yourself and the energy that you get back by helping others, it's just sort of this never ending,
It's a
euphoric's a good
synergy.
word.
Yeah. And it's a synergy with your surroundings and the universe and yourself and others and the world and your purpose.
But to like the whole, like, I didn't do that right, and I'm open minded to the learning cycle of what that means too, is so pivotal, because too many people shut down, they don't open up. And the reason this generationally is going to be adopted is because we see the vulnerability
Mhm.
from the younger folks that say, I don't want to have this anymore. We've kind of been faking it in recent years. So that's where my optimism comes from, and hopefully that's a good enough answer. But like curiosity to me is kind of like the unlock to a new dimension of mental wellness, I guess, if
Mhm.
as cliche as that sounds.
And I would imagine that you have to live outside of fear in order to be curious.
And live in the fear. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's both. Fear is a funny word, and we don't
Yeah.
need to go off on a side, you know, conversation on this, but like fear is the opposite of love, right? And
Right.
yeah, you avoid the fear so that you can encounter the pleasures of life, but you also confront it when you know that love can overcome it. And that's a really interesting dynamic to watch play out. And that's what I mean by, I guess, understanding yourself. You get to see and then categorize that in real time if you trust in your abilities to do so in real time. And that's a learned mechanism. And it's so hard to put some of these things into words, which why I appreciate a podcast like this, is that these are the fundamentals that you can't teach, but you have to like have a learned experience through. And to come full circle, psychedelics are a
Yeah.
means and a mechanism to kind of
They are.
unlock that thought process.
Right, because everything that we've been trained to think when you do the psychedelics, and maybe I'm incorrect in this, but I would imagine that, like you were talking about the plasticity,
Hmm.
it changes the pathways in your mind.
Yep.
Yeah, and so that then gives you a space to see it in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a vision. Another thing I never thought to put into words, but like it's a visual representation of the things that you're learning. Like if you weren't put through grade school, how would we know that you're getting smarter?
Mhm.
Neuroplasticity is allowing neurons to be more active because you're changing the way that you're thinking, and it's allowing a more flowing stream of consciousness, if that makes sense. And what
Yeah.
does that lead to? More creativity, more positivity and love, what I just said of curiosity. And it's this, again, self-fulfilling prophecy. So it is an unlock. So I'm glad you got there with me, because it's really important for people to understand that.
Yeah. I think it's amazing for you that you actually naturally are in that space, because so many people have tried so many things to try to get there. The fact that, and I don't say naturally because I do think it's a choice too, in a lot of ways. I feel like, you had your environment and you chose to go into a space where this was how you adapted to life. But to come from that standpoint and then try to help others get there, for me, is admirable.
Love it. I appreciate the feedback and the love. And I mean, that's what I hope to get out of this experience is
Yeah.
Nucleus can be super successful, or it could just kind of exist. And I'd be happy with both, because the existence of Nucleus is the purpose that we are shooting for. And that's to help as many people as we can. If that's one life, that's enough of a reward.
Yeah.
Because every life is precious, and we have to find our sweet spots and our purpose. And I get fulfillment from knowing at that level of granularity that every life counts, and the work that we do, no matter what, at whatever scale of business success or even what people would consider a failure, it's important. And that's what allows me to feel this way. So,
Right.
yeah, I appreciate the observation.
Yeah. I mean, the awareness, no matter what happens with the company, which I really feel like you guys have a good team and a good, good information. So I think the company will do well. But regardless, the awareness that you bring with doing all of this is going to open doors that would never have been opened before.
Yeah, that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Love it. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate
it.
you. Yeah, absolutely. I will encourage other people to check out your website and do a little bit more.
Definitely.
They have money and they want to invest, great. If not, just look through it and see how you guys are changing the world. And how would they go about doing that?
So withnucleus.com is the main website. I feel like I should point to the WeFunder. It's just wefunder.com/nucleus if you do want to invest. And then at the Nucleus site, you'll see some of our companies. Those are obviously their own companies, so feel free to check out Newly and Psychedelic Invest and Scirise. We also put on events. We're located in South Florida, but we do a bunch of intimate events. So look those up if you're ever in Miami, or we do tend to travel. And just sign up for one of our technologies, our newsletter. Follow me online if you'd like. I'm Logan Lenz everywhere pretty much. But happy to answer any questions. I love talking to our audience, or to go back to it, anyone that's curious, right? Like,
Yeah.
my people. So feel free to email me, find me online. Happy to continue this conversation.
Appreciate it. Well, you've definitely increased my curiosity on the subject.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbie.
Mm-hmm.